Okay, let me get this disclaimer out the way before I start ranting and raving here. I'm going to be very, 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 and one more just for extra measure, very careful with my language. I'm going to be very careful. I try to be somewhat slick with the title, but I'm going to be very careful here. I'm going to explain some things that help cause um, anti-Semitism. Dare I use that phrase? And I'm not going to simply whitewash it, from people like, that Zarathustra guy who is Jewish himself. I remember seeing this guy. I was like, dang gum. Guy looked like the typical, German Aryan, but of course, he was Jewish. So I'm not going to go down that route of, being, of making, more Israeli apologia. I'm not going to go down the full-on Wignat path or go down the whichever path. I'm going to try to explain this very, very carefully. Be very, very careful. So the thing is, I'm no expert on the history of Judea or, of of King David or any of that type of thing. I'm not. But I'll explain some things that help cause people to go down that road. And I'm going to start with, what should I start with? Let me think about this. I'm going to be very careful here. Like I say, I'm literally walking on eggshells right now where I'm like, oh boy. And I'm just like, I hope I don't hit a landmine. I'm probably going to hit a landmine, and it's just going to, hopefully it doesn't go too bad. But I think let's start with today, and we'll kind of work our way backwards through at least the 20th century. And yes, we will be talking about that event a little bit. So let's go backwards in time here a little bit with privilege. Let's use some privilege here. Let's think back to the borough of Brooklyn. Let's see. I think it's 1990. I want to say, or 1992. Maybe it was like 1990. And there was a Rabbi Schneerson. And Rabbi Schneerson was being driven through the city. He was trying to get to a meeting, I think. And they were hitting, running through lights and, just hauling ass. And they hit a brother and sister. The brother died. Sister lived. Put it frankly. They happened to be, I believe they were of, let me see here. Let me do this here. All right. And okay, here we go. I'm trying to be very, very careful. Here we go. Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Let's see here. And let me see if I'll cut to the chase here. Okay, legacy. Okay, global legacy. Okay, let's talk about global leadership. Okay, in God we trust. Spoke the position of the United States as a world superpower and its praise. Yeah, in God we trust. Okay, Israel. The great interest in the affairs of Israel and did whatever was in his power. Okay, let's see here. Operation Entebbe, Soviet Jewry. Hey, they're not going to mention it, are they? I'm really trying to look for it here. Oh, what was it? Where was it? I mean, I'm trying to think here. Work habits. I'm really trying to find it right now because it's interesting that they cut that out. Okay, what borough of Brooklyn was it? I'm trying to think. I think it's Crown Heights. Crown Heights riots. Crown Heights riots. Okay, 1991. Here we go. Okay, so it was 1991. I'm gonna read through a little bit here, trying to give y'all the details here. Okay, so yeah, here we go. What happened was, okay, they were driving a station wagon. This is August 19, 1991. Joseph Liefsch, 22, was driving a station wagon with 3 passengers on the west on President Street, part of a 3-car motorcade of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of the Chabad Lubavitch Hasidic movement. I'm trying not to be funny. I'm trying to be serious here. The police, okay, the procession was led by an unmarked police car with two officers with its rooftop light flashing. Police car and Schneerson's automobile crossed Utica Avenue on a green light and proceeded along President Street at normal speed, but Lifsh's vehicle had fallen behind. Not to, okay, so now I'm adding some detail here. I'm trying to make sure I get the facts straight. Okay. Not wishing to lose sight of Schneerson's car, Lifsh's vehicle either crossed Utica Avenue on a yellow light or ran a red light. There was no indication of the exact speed of Lifsh's vehicle. Lifsh's vehicle struck a car behind a car being driven on Utica Avenue, veered onto the sidewalk, knocked a 600-pound stone building pillar down, and pinned two children against an iron gate covering the window of a first-floor apartment in a four-story brick building. 7-year-old Gavin Cato, the son of Guyanese immigrants, who was working on his bicycle chain while on the sidewalk near his apartment on President Street, died instantly. Okay, his cousin, excuse me. Once again, I'm trying to get the facts straight. I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be good faith here. Okay, his 7-year-old cousin, Angela Cato, who was playing nearby, survived but was severely injured. Lifsh believed he had the right of way to proceed through the intersection because of the police escort. Lifsh said he deliberately steered his car away from adults on the sidewalk toward the wall, a distance of about 25 yards, in order to stop the car. Lifsh later said that the car did not come to a full stop when it hit the building, but slid to the left along the wall and hit the children. Okay. Death of Gavin Cato. Accounts differ as to the next sequence of events. After the collision, Lifsh said that the first thing he did was to try to lift the car in order to free the two children beneath it. Members of the EMS unit who arrived on the scene about 3 minutes after the accident said that Lifsh was being beaten and pulled out of the station wagon by 3 or 4 men. A volunteer ambulance unit. Here we go. Here we go. Hatzolah. Those, y'all know what I'm talking about. Let's get it out the way. Hatzolah. Ambulance corps arrived on the scene at about 8:23 p.m., followed by police and a city ambulance. The latter took Gavin Cato to Kings County Hospital, arriving at 8:32 p.m., pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Volunteers from a second Hatzolah ambulance helped Angela Cato until a second city ambulance arrived and took her to the same hospital. Oh, boy. So once again, we've already got it, don't we? We've already got the narrative set up. So let's continue. Let's continue reading this here. Like I said, I'm trying to be of good faith here. We're gonna skip some of this. Oh boy. Okay. Oh, okay. 2 attending police officers, as well as a technician from the city ambulance, directed the Hatzolah driver to remove Lifsh from the scene for his safety, while Gavin Cato was being removed from beneath the station wagon. According to the New York Times, more than 250 neighborhood residents, mostly black teenagers, many of whom were shouting "redacted, redacted, redacted," jeered the driver of the car and turned the anger on the police. And we're going to skip down here. Okay, some members of the community, they were throwing bottles and rocks. Was taken from the scene, was unwilling, died because the Hatzolah ambulance was unwilling to help non-redacted. Once again, you have to ask the question. This is one of the things that helps build anti-Semitism right here. This is one of the things. It says, well, why didn't they do that then? And this is something that apologists and these folks that say, well, anti-Semitism is bad, look at this story, and then they will find whatever narrative they can to shift and just say, well, we need to look at all the facts. We need to look at all the details. We need to wait. Builds anger, doesn't it? Okay. After the death of Gavin Cato, members of the black community believed that the decision to remove Lifsh from the scene first was racially motivated. They also said that this was one example of a perceived system of preferential treatment afforded to Jews. Redacted in Crown Heights. The preferential treatment was reported to include biased actions by law enforcement and uneven allocations of bit. Okay, let's cut to the chase even more here. Okay, A number of studies focused on the allegation that law enforcement habitually favored redacted over African Americans. City Journal refuted the allegation. An interview with Rabbi Shmuel Butman, published in 1991, mentions a police directive to Hatzalah to transport Lifsh, along with redacted, already injured by rioters, without transporting either of the Cato children. We did exactly what the police officers wisely advised us. Okay. Based on the protesters' statements and actions during the rioting, Butman said, "We were always hoping that after, you know where I'm going with that." So let's once again, referred to diamond dealers. Who cares about Al Sharpton? Brandeis University, Edward S. Shapiro. I wonder if he's related to Ben Shapiro. I don't know. Later described the riot as the most anti-Semitic incident in American history. In a book about it in 2006, almost immediately after the riot, a host, and yet he's not going to talk. Okay, here we go. So this is okay. So here's what was the aftermath? Yankel Rosenbaum. About 3 hours after the riots began, early in the morning, on the morning of August 20th, a group of 20 young black men surrounded Yankel Rosenbaum, a 29-year-old Jewish university student in the United States conducting research for his doctorate. This is something that if you really do research this event, you'll find that his brother, who definitely has an Australian accent, continues to come back to Brooklyn. And he did a lot of speeches and everything else. You can find, this is one of the things you'll find an Australian video. I can't remember which. I think it's Journeyman Pictures. I think that's what it is. But Journeyman Pictures, if you find that video, and of course it has Dr. Khalid Muhammad, at the time I think still part of the Nation of Islam, who went to the museum and was talking about very much did some very good PR and very good fanning the flames of Anywho, and they stabbed him several times in the back and beat him severely, fracturing his skull. Before being taken to the hospital, Rosenbaum identified 16-year-old Lemrick Nelson Jr. as his assailant. This is, once again, there's a whole episode I remember of this on Law and Order that they did on this. They've done a few episodes on anti-Semitism on that channel, partly on that show, because of course Scott Wolf is himself Jewish. So anyway, identified his assailant in a lineup. Rosenbaum died later that night because a doctor didn't notice a stab wound in his chest. How the hell does that happen? Okay. Nelson was charged with murder as an assault. Okay. So what happened but remember this in your head here. What happened to Mr. Lifsh? What happened to Mr. Lifsh, the guy who fell behind and decided to speed up and was basically careening on the, just rolling down the sidewalk and got these two kids pinned? What happened? What happened to this guy? So Al Sharpton and Sonny Carson. Al Sharpton I can't speak to. Sonny Carson, interesting fellow. Related shooting murder. We'll skip over that. Court case. A grand jury composed of 10 black, 8 white, and 5 Hispanic jurors found no cause to indict Lifsh. Brooklyn District Attorney Charles J. Hines explained that under New York law, the single act of losing control of a car is not criminal negligence, even if death or injury resulted. Ooh! Yowza, that's going to upset people. Lifsh waived immunity and testified before the grand jury about an hour after hearing Lifsh's testimony. The grand jury voted not to indict him. Subsequently, Lifsh moved to Israel, where his family lives, because he claimed his life was threatened. In Israel, Lifsh settled in the Lubavitch village of Kfar Chabad, or I think that's Chabad, but yeah, Chabad, I think that's how it's pronounced. Afterwards, Hines fought unsuccessfully for the public release of testimony that the grand jury had heard. His lawsuit was dismissed, And the judge noted that there are more than 3/4 of the witnesses who had been contacted refused to waive their right to privacy. The judge also expressed concern to the witnesses' safety. Yeah, this is one of the things that led to Mayor Dinkins losing. But that is a it's an interesting story nonetheless. And like I say, that's Wikipedia. Take it with a grain of salt, as always. But I found that that's one of those things that you hear about a lot. And if you want a question as to why that happened, and of course, all people can say, all the people that will fight against anti-Semitism or be anti-racist, when they hear that story, all they can say is, well, that is horrible. That's awful. Yes, but we need to change the laws in New York City. That's all these folks can say. Now, of course, I'm trying to be very careful about my language, like I say. But that's just one story. I was going to think about others, but frankly, that one is enough. If you ever wonder why that's such an issue, and if you ever wonder why it's seen that way, like I said, we mentioned Hatzalah. For those that know, Hatzalah, of course, is the private ambulance service that is in at least New York State. And I believe in Los Angeles, they are still having battles with the LA Fire Department because, of course, that's where a lot of these, the ambulances are under their jurisdiction. The fire departments basically say these guys do not stick to the same rules that we do. And so they're butting heads. As far as I know, they're still butting heads on this issue. But yeah, Hatzalah is this feeds into a lot of narratives. Is once again, I mean, I almost want to go there. I almost want to Fed post, but I'm going to leave it to you, the listener, to find out that thing. Yeah. They fear castizos. Okay. Yeah. All right. What I would say to that, though, is it's a very complex issue, isn't it? And just that one story, hearing that story, and not just the story, but hearing this very turbulent time in the history of the United States, and more specifically in the history of Brooklyn as a borough and Crown Heights, this doesn't sit very well with people. It's the same thing when people talk about here is Ha'el, the Jewish community, I believe it's a Hasidic community in upstate New York, and hearing about issues of, I'm just going to say it, pedophilia. And of course, the narratives are out there. Let me just put it that way. And there's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of things that people will talk about, and they'll just, let's dab on, dare I say it, I'm not Catholic, but I will say this, is that let's dab on these folks. Let's dab on Catholics. Let's dab on, all these other folks and say, oh, they're, pedophilia. Oh, but we're not going to talk about that. And so this is very, very dangerous stuff. And there's this idea, once again, that, you can say is that one thing led to another, and, is that, the anti-Semitism led to them creating their own communities, this and that. It's a slippery slope, isn't it? Anywho, I think I've beaten that story with a dead horse. I was going to talk about other things, but I've watched a video, which was very, very shallow about the Federal Reserve. And they just talked about the start of it and basically how it came to be, and then didn't talk about anything else. They didn't talk about anything further than that. They didn't talk about people like Bernanke. They didn't talk about the idea that basically, in some ways, how it's seen is that the Federal Reserve launders money. Now, of course, there's a lot of, like I say, once again, the Federal Reserve is a separate entity. The President of the United States cannot even go in. But that's a whole other issue, and that's something that's way above my intelligence. And I will keep it there. Like I said, I was trying to be very, very careful. I know I stepped on some landmines. Luckily, I think that those landmines were like M80s, and like I blew off some toes. But I think that's about it. But anyway, I want to leave it there. I want to try to be very, very careful. Like I said, once again, let me make sure here. Let me make sure if you cut to the end of this, just to make sure, don't do anything stupid. I just mentioned this as a story to say, that's all. That's all. This is something that you don't hear from folks when they talk about anti-Semitism. They would rather talk about the bigger issues. They would rather talk about the Shoah in in Poland and in Germany, but they don't really talk about modern day. They don't like to do that. They don't like to mention other aspects that exist in the it's much more complicated than issue than you think. And I'm going to keep it there. And you can, I'm sure that someone is going to see this and say, "Oh my gosh, why are you doing this?" And they're going to be angry. And I accept it. I do. And I'll just say, okay. So, anywho, I think I'll keep it there. I appreciate those two people watching. Weeb Abu and your comment that they fear Castizos. Yeah, Castizo futurism. Yep. You probably came in after that video. I'm sure you did. And you know what? Your comments are noted, and I will leave it at that. Y'all have a good day. That's all I can say to y'all. And I don't preach hate towards anybody in particular. I'm going to leave it there. Have a good one. Goodbye. All right. I didn't end it properly. Sorry about that, folks. Let me go ahead and do that. Yeah. And there we go. See you later. Bye-bye.